Miami kicked off their long road trip in Memphis on Wednesday, and after letting yet another double-digit lead slip away late in the game, were led to victory by Bam Adebayo in a total team effort. But the concern moving forward is Tyler Herro, who rolled his ankle the first quarter, would sit out the rest of the game. What happens if he misses time, and who steps up in his place? We break down the game, the rough road ahead for Miami's rotation, and answer your questions on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg. Joining me as always is David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase Medical.com. Recording this Wednesday night after the Heat beat the Grizzlies 108-102. The biggest development from the game is Tyler Herro, who with 55 seconds left in the first quarter stepped on Jaren Jackson's foot, turned his right ankle. He immediately hopped off to the locker room and was ruled out for the rest of the game with a sprained right ankle. We'll talk about how the Heat can withstand Herro potentially missing time later in the show. But David, the Heat have now won 3 straight games to improve to 4-4. What was your biggest takeaway from the game?
I think it was just Bam Adebayo to stellar play, but I think it was a great, as I mentioned before, overall team effort. Like everybody stepping up collectively. An injury like Tyler could have such a negative repercussion, not just because of the loss of his production, but all of a sudden the mood gets bummed out. You know, you're not sure exactly what happens and who steps up in that role. It was a very interesting matchup, too, because Memphis coming off of their first victory of the season, Miami with a big win over the Lakers on Monday night. So both teams kind of looking to build momentum on Wednesday. And despite the loss of Tyler, Miami formed together to form a much better unit. They were working very well collectively. They had some miscues here and there, especially late in the game when Memphis crept back into it. But they hung tough, moved the ball well, and did a really good job defensively when it mattered most and came away with a much-needed victory.
It was looking rough there for a minute after Tyler Herro got hurt. Like I said, about a minute left in the first quarter, the Heat winning at that point, and then really could only score 12 points between like a minute left in the first quarter and about 4 minutes left in that second quarter. They had a hard time getting any kind of offense whatsoever. A lot of that was due to the bench unit mostly being in there. Jimmy Butler was getting his rest. Bam was getting his rest. And that bench unit, when it was together, there was a couple of reserves who had good moments. We'll get to that in credit cookies in a little bit. But the bench unit in general was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And it was what led the Grizzlies into that game. But even after that, I thought that, okay, like Jimmy and Bam, they were kind of trying to figure things out. Kyle Lowry was like, okay, what do I do now kind of thing without Tyler Herro in there? Because Tyler had been so important to this team, 25 points per game, 21 shot attempts per game, which were so important for this team, just his singular shot creation. And without that, they had to figure out how to score. And it wasn't like they were an awesome scoring team before. Like we said, coming into this game, 26th in offensive rating. So it took them about a quarter, a little bit less, to figure it out. And then they did figure it out. And you got to give them credit. And the big part that they figured out was, let's just give the ball to Bam Adebayo. 30 points tonight. Got to the free throw line 16 times, 16 free throw shots. He was awesome. We'll talk about Haywood Highsmith stepping up in a big way later on. Jimmy Butler was handling the ball a lot more than he pretty much had been. His stat line didn't jump off, but he was just sort of initiating offense. The ball seemed to be in his hands a lot more than usual this season. And I think that's basically what helped them figure it out. Plus, it helps that they shot 11 of 28 from three-point range, so 39%, almost 46% overall from the field. All of those things helped, not to mention that the Grizzlies are banged up too.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, the Grizzlies were missing a bunch of players, so they were shorthanded. No Ja Morant, no Steven Adams, and on and on. They're just like, I think there were 8 total players on their injury list, and they brought up a bunch of guys that would not normally be playing out there. And yet Miami couldn't capitalize because of those reserve units. Those normally belong to Tyler. That's the let Tyler Herro cook lineups where he really gets to take over, make his imprint on the game, playing alongside some of those reserves. But without him, it did take them some time. Eventually, Duncan Robinson wound up starting in his place, especially in the third quarter. He took over there, and he wound up having a really good game. But everybody just really chipped in. I really liked the group effort mentality. And I don't know if it was something Eric Spoelstra specifically said to this group, or if it's just that innate understanding in that Heat locker room, next man up, somebody's going to get their opportunities. And everybody seemed to find their niche, their role very, very quickly. Despite that lull in the second quarter, they were able to really figure it out. They got some great effort from a lot of different players tonight.
We got to focus a little bit more on Bam, though. This season, what he's been able to do now, especially these last handful of games, here's just what he's missed one game out of Miami's 8. So of the 7 games, here's what he's put together: 22 points, 27 points, 19 points, 21 points and 14 rebounds in his first double-double of the year, then 18 points, then 22 points, 18 rebounds, and 10 assists against the Lakers for his first triple-double of the year, and then a double-double tonight, 30 points and 11 rebounds. He is stepping up in a big way. He talked about after the game on the broadcast about how he wants to get to the free throw line a little bit more, that Eric Spoelstra is pushing him to get to the free throw line a little bit more. And those, I don't want to call them easy points, right? Because it takes a lot of effort to get to the line and get fouled and all those things. And he ate Jaren Jackson Jr.'s lunch today, by the way.
Yes,
it wasn't even close. So
no,
he was by far the best player on the court, even though Jaren Jackson had 28 points.
Is he a top 10 player so far this season?
Bam, he seems like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think he's getting a superstar call. I mean, we've seen his offense take another level. I mean, it hasn't been completely consistent yet, but we're seeing better and better games from him. That triple-double against the Lakers was huge. And tonight, again, just a monster game against a very good defensive player in Jaren Jackson, perhaps a little overrated. Maybe Bam was taking it somewhat personally, but we saw him attack Anthony Davis in the Lakers game. We saw him attack Jaren Jackson Jr. too. Really took those challenges personally, and whatever fuels and whatever motivates him at this point is really driving him to be one of the best players in the league.
You could tell he takes these matchups personally.
Oh, yeah.
And even to the point where Jaren Jackson Jr. would complain about a foul call. He ended up picking 5 calls up today, and Bam would just sort of make a face that was definitely a foul, at him in sort of his direction. Camera picked it up a couple times. But he's not shying away. Not that he ever shied away from a motivated, but just from his game, he developed that free throw line jumper in part because he did not want to go straight up at those bigger dudes. He didn't want to go up against Jaren Jackson Jr., who might be the best rim protector in the league right now because of the blocks and all the things that he provides there.
Yeah.
Right. He would shy away from guys like Brook Lopez, like Anthony Davis, all these guys. He would just sort of float away from them and kind of became a finesse player in those kinds of matchups. But in these this year, you don't see any of that in his game at all. I mean, he still has the free throw line jumper and stuff, but I've even made this point before where instead of sort of floating away and falling away from the basket on those jumpers, he's kind of putting a shoulder in or an elbow into the guy and kind of leaning into him just to get a couple of extra feet closer to the basket. And that just boosts your efficiency overall. But even when he's not doing that, he's getting to the free throw line, which is even more important, even more efficient. And the Heat just need efficiency from their top scorers. And I think Bam, along with Tyler Herro, has been their top scorer so far this year. Quickly, David, the end of that game, they're up by 10 points with 2 minutes left in this thing, and they just throw up all over themselves. It was turnover, foul, missed 3, turnover, foul, something like that. And they almost, it's a 1-possession game with 30 seconds left. They end up holding on, but does the ending poison the results at all for you?
A little bit, but I think it was a strange game again because you're having to deal with the loss of Tyler Highsmith, who was great. Wound up, I think he's still on a minutes restriction and he didn't play late in that fourth quarter. Another head scratcher, considering what happened.
He actually went up to the scores table and Jaime Jaquez had gotten that steal and transition dunk and Spo called him back. So I don't think the minutes restriction is there because if he was going to check in, I just think he decided to ride Jaime.
All right, fair enough. Either way, no, I don't think it sours it completely. I mean, Miami still has to figure it out. They're not a perfect team, but they'll take the win. It's a good momentum builder considering you're going on this long road trip.
Beggars can't be choosers, right? I think that's fine.
Fair enough.
Which players stepped up with Tyler Herro out and why Jaime Jaquez Jr. ended up closing this game out? We're going to talk all about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners over at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us this week on eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Players of the Week. He's got a 5-man team here, and one of those players, Bismack Biyombo, a member of the Memphis Grizzlies that took on the Miami Heat today. Bismack Biyombo just recently signed to make up for the loss of Brandon Clark, the loss of Steven Adams. They need some depth there in that center position. Biyombo's going to get a lot of opportunities, even though the team is just 1-7 overall. He looked solid overall tonight, 4 of 4 from the field. 1 of 2 from the free throw line, but also finished with 10 rebounds and a total of 9 points. So not a bad night for Biyombo.
I've always liked Biyombo. I don't really know why he went unsigned for that long in the first place. He's super efficient, always really has been. First possession of the game is a pick and roll for Biyombo right down the lane, right? And then he kind of cleaned that up a little bit as the game went on. But 9 points doesn't sound like a whole lot, but he's not going to be going up against Bam Adebayo every night either. You know what I mean? So I think that he's gonna be getting kind of 9 to 14 points probably, but then 10 rebounds. Like, this guy is a rebound machine in fantasy basketball. Like, there's a bunch of center injuries in the league, not just to the Memphis guys, but Anthony Davis is now going to be out or in and out of the lineup. Like, if you're if you're a fantasy owner that's missing a center and you need to boost your rebound category numbers, Biyombo is just like a plug and play kind of guy there.
Yeah, big innings eater there. Gets his stats and does the dirty work really well. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. What's a memory of a car that you loved, Wes? Did you ever have a car that was just? I know you drove that one car from California when you moved here. Put a lot of miles in that. Yeah, put a lot of miles in that one. You still have it?
No, ended up the lease expired on that one. But my absolute favorite car is the first car I ever had was a Honda Civic, and it was red. It was red, and it had a spoiler on it. That's how cool I was in high school.
That sounds like a good car. If you're looking for the parts to replace that spoiler on your Honda Civic, then let me tell you, eBay Motors is one for you. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, even spoilers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motor has it. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions do apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every dayers, make sure you tune in on Friday. We'll have an update on Tyler Herro's ankle injury, and we'll get a chance to go even more in depth into what the Heat do after that. We will talk a little bit more about Tyler Herro's injury, though, in the third segment, but not in this segment, because this is the tastiest segment in Locked On Heat. It is time for credit cookies, David. As always, we have 10 credit cookies to hand out to the winning team. Where do we want to start?
I guess Bam, just to get that out of the way, because he was so sensational. I think as much of a team effort as it was, you don't get anywhere close to seeing those big moments from Haywood Highsmith or Kyle Lowry or Jaime Jaquez without Bam carrying the brunt of the load there. I think he deserves 3 credit cookies tonight.
3 is good. We may end up giving him more by the time we get done with this, but
there's just so many other players. There's so many other players that I think they're. Yeah, I mean, I think I've got like 5 players that I think deserve them.
Got 6.
Not the whole starting lineup, because Tyler unfortunately missed time and he doesn't get a cookie. Here's to a speedy recovery, by the way, for Tyler. Hopefully he'll be out there soon. Let's go with Jimmy, because I think his game was a little bit more nuanced. I'm comfortable giving him just the 1 cookie. I think he had a good overall game and really seemed more, again, aggressive, more engaged. I think he's continued to round into form. Solid overall night for him with 15 points, Struggled a little bit from the floor, 5 of 13, and didn't get to the line as much, but made an impact in other ways. Again, just doing just enough on a night when maybe he wasn't exactly ready to score 100 points. I maybe he could be criticized for not taking over the game, but you know what? On a night when Bam was as dominant as he was, you kind of just let it ride, right? So I don't have a problem with that necessarily,
and getting contributions from other players too. Like I said, I thought Jimmy did what he had to do in terms of, hey, I'm gonna run the show here. I'm gonna get everybody into offense. I'm gonna take that off of Tyler Herro's plate because he's not here. I'm gonna take it off of Kyle Lowry's plate because he hasn't been any good at it all season. Like, let me just handle this. But David, I'm honestly surprised. You have a kid. I thought you would be well versed in the art of positive reinforcement, right? Like, the guy took 4 3-pointers tonight. He gets another cookie for that. More cookies.
You know what? I don't know. I can't give him 2 cookies, man. I don't think he deserves 2 cookies, but the 4 3-pointers and the fact that he hit 2 of those, he's hitting them at a 50% rate this season. I don't know how likely that is to maintain, but he's been very, very good, and it's a much-needed breath of fresh air. And again, it never feels like it's out of place. This isn't a rush shot. This isn't a late shot clock situation. This is him in the flow of the offense, being open from the corner, from the wing, and letting it fly. I'm happy to see it continuing to move forward. We talked about that earlier today on another episode we recorded. Is it real or not? It absolutely looks like it's part of here to stay, at least for the short term.
I mean, I'm here for it. Let's talk about Haywood Highsmith.
Yes.
He was phenomenal tonight. Yeah. 27 minutes, 14 points, 2 rebounds and assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks.
Yes,
everywhere
in the first quarter.
Was a plus 12, still the starting power forward. Safe to say that he's the starting power forward. We're done. No minutes restriction. Kevin Love is fully healthy. He's not even in the rotation anymore. That ship has sailed at this point. At one point in the third quarter, when the Heat desperately needed it, he had scored or assisted on 11 of 13 straight Heat points. He is screening the right way. He had one play where he got the ball in the right corner, swung it back to Kyle Lowry above the break on the same side, and then just flowed back into a dribble handoff with Kyle Lowry. And as he does that, puts his butt into the Memphis defender to screen him off, and it gives Kyle Lowry a wide open 3-pointer. I know that we use the PJ Tucker comparison a lot, in part because Haywood Highsmith uses it a lot. It is his role model. That was the most PJ Tuckeriest play I think I've ever seen Haywood Highsmith have on offense. It was great.
Fair. And I'm not going to say his potential is greater than PJ's, but considering the arm length, the wingspan, and the 3 block shots all in the first quarter, like, he could have some really big momentum shifting defensive possessions like he already has in just his few starts. And with those block shots, always a possibility. Like, I'm not concerned if somebody gets past him or if he's even coming over as a weak side help defender. Like, there's a possibility, and even at, like, generously listed at 6'5", that he could wind up altering a shot. He could be a chased out block kind of guy. Like,
straight up on Aldama. One of the first quarter blocks just went straight up vertical, like Roy Hibbert verticality, straight up and down on Aldama. Aldama comes in. Aldama is bigger. He's a big dude. He is bigger than Highsmith. Yeah. And Highsmith didn't even move. Like, he was a brick wall. And that's the thing I always talk about with Haywood Highsmith. When he came to the Heat versus now, his physique is totally different. He is chiseled. He is stronger than he's ever been. And I think it's an underrated part of his game. How many cookies for Haywood?
2.
2. Can't be as much as Bam. I think that's fair, 2. Let's give some to Jaime Jaquez Jr. He closes the game in Highsmith's spot. We mentioned this before. Highsmith was actually at the scorer's table about to check in. And then Jaime Jaquez has that steal and score at the end of the fourth quarter, about like 4 or 5 minutes left. And Spo's is like, you know what? Let's just ride this unit out. It's actually building quite a bit of a lead. Built a 10-point lead, and then went on to throw that lead away at the end there. But then it was Jaime Jaquez Jr. at the end hitting the game-clinching 3-pointer to seal the win. His final stat line: 11 points on 4 of 5 shooting. Made the 1 3-pointer that he took at the end there. 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Just an all-around great effort from the rookie.
Very good game. I don't know. 1 doesn't seem like enough. 2 seems about right, but it's cutting into the possibility of giving guys like Duncan and Kyle some cookies too, and I think they're fully deserving.
All right, so then 1 each to Duncan and Kyle. Is that where we're at?
Yes.
That's fine. Kyle Lowry, 17 points, 11 rebounds, huge. 9 assists. I mean, that's almost a triple-double. Easily his best game of the season.
Yeah, I mean, really looking for his shot too. No hesitation. Such a far cry for that first game of the season where everybody's wondering whether he'd go without a single field goal attempt
Good
in
point.
48 minutes of play. And
Team
here he
high
is.
7 threes.
Yeah,
3-point
he looked great. Like really, really nice form, and just he was a lifesaver today. Again, taking over a big chunk of the offense with Tyler gone, and he was certainly doing his part. So one does not feel like enough, but I mean, at the same time, he does deserve at least some credit.
Let's give him 2 and give a shout out to Duncan Robinson. I think that's fair. I think Duncan's going to earn a lot of credit cookies going forward if he's starting in place of Tyler Herro. I think a shout out to Duncan. 35 minutes, 9 points, 3 of 7 shooting, 2 of 5 from 3-point range. It felt like he scored more, maybe because the baskets that he did have were big ones, but he also just kept making the right play over and over. I love his floor game more than I ever have. It's so much more improved than it's been. So I think a shout out for him if that means we can move another cookie to Kyle Lowry.
He did have 5 turnovers too, something I did not realize in the course of the game. So, up and down perhaps, but overall, I'd say a positive overall game. And he's going to get more opportunity. And I think he's in the right headspace for it too. Like, he's seen his confidence grow this season. I think the versatility of his game is having a positive impact as a playmaker, even if some people on this podcast don't particularly care for that versatility.
Don't throw me under the bus.
You're coming around on it, right? You're coming around. You're starting to see the benefits.
I appreciate that it's part of his game, and I like actually the ratio more tonight when it was 5 3-point attempts of his 7 shots. If we can kind of keep that ratio, right? If he's taking 14 shots, if 10 of them are threes, then I'm in. But it's when it's like 6 3-pointers out of the 14 shots, I'm not in as much. So
okay, I hear you.
Who takes Tyler Herro's place in the starting lineup? Is it Duncan Robinson? Do we actually already know the formula for the Heat winning without Tyler Herro? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Look, we spend a lot of time talking together, you and I. We get fired up together on wins, losses, who starts and who sits. I'm thankful for that connection that we have. And today, I want our chat to be a little bit more personally. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications. You realize what that means? Bring on extended travel, bring on the next natural disaster or whatever supply chain issue. You're covered, my friend. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Revatio, prescription. And this is possible because of our friends over at Jase Medical. Go online right now at jasemedical.com and you can get your 12-month supply on your daily medications. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jase. I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half to have it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply, and I also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies, and I highly recommend this for everyone. If you or someone you love would get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily medication, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKEDON, for $20 off your purchase.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. It's a sprained right ankle for Tyler Herro, who has been Miami's top scorer this season. We just got done doing a whole episode on his all-around improvement. Eric Spoelstra said after the game that all they know is that it is a sprained ankle. An X-ray came back clean, and that Tyler Herro is going to get an MRI on Thursday. So, David, what do the Heat do if Herro has to miss time? Because it did not look good when it happened.
I think I told you, I think everybody kind of has to find a way to step up, similar to what they did today. Like, I don't know that there's any one player that you can pin all of Tyler's offensive creation on. Like, they don't have that player on the roster. He is your best bucket getter. Like, whether you criticize his efficiency or not, as you've said many times, the taking of the shots is important for this offense, whether he's hitting them or not. And you'd like for them to hit. And he's been a much better shooter, I think, as the season has progressed, a much more improved playmaker as well within the flow of the offense. So that's a lot to sacrifice if and when we do eventually find out how much time Herro is going to miss. So I think, to answer your question, I think Duncan Robinson winds up replacing him in terms of the lineup, and he'll probably start and he'll probably play a significant amount of time. But other players are going to have to step up. You've got Caleb Martin as a potential option. He's still hurt. You don't want to rush him back necessarily, but I think he's going to have more playing time. I think we're going to see Haywood Highsmith continue to start, and then you're going to have to get some more minutes from, I don't know, maybe Josh Richardson, possibly some of the two-way guys, Cole Swider, RJ Hampton. I don't know if they're quite ready, but at the same time, yeah, I know, but you don't have anybody else but Tyler who does what Tyler does on this roster. Right. Hampton's as close to proximity as you can get because he's just a scorer, at least from that mentality. But I don't know that he's good enough yet. I don't know that he's polished enough, and certainly not in the defensive end.
No, he's not. And I think you're basically looking at the group you have now. I think if you want to get into the whole free agency thing of it, there's Austin Rivers, Terrence Ross. I don't think the Heat are even close to that yet.
No.
And I don't think they just sent all these two-way guys down to Sioux Falls because the G League season is starting soon. And you can't expect that, like you said, from RJ Hampton, Cole Swider, any of these guys. Like, they're not ready to do that. And you also have to figure out whose spot in the rotation that they would take, and all the players ahead of them are better than them. That's why they're on two-way contracts. In terms of an ankle sprain, there's different grades of this, right? And so that's, I guess, what the MRI is going to show in terms of how long it's going to take and things like that. So, like, for example, Reggie Jackson, I'm looking at in street clothes right now. Like, Reggie Jackson a couple years ago had a grade 3. That's 6 to 8 weeks of missed time, right? A better grade could mean like 4 to 6 weeks. So that's what we're talking about here. I think it's fair to say that Tyler Herro is going to miss time, and it could be a lot of time. And just because you beat Memphis, who is, at least, right? And just because he missed, or just because the Heat won this game, the Grizzlies stink. And there's a lot better teams coming up, right, on the schedule, and most of it on the road. I want to look ahead of the schedule here in a second, but in terms of how they replace Tyler Herro, they got to do it. And I think it's just the formula we saw in the playoffs last year. I know Max Strus and Gabe Vincent are gone, but it's on Duncan Robinson to replace Tyler Herro in the starting lineup, okay? And he's got to provide floor spacing. He's got to provide that shooting. And much to my chagrin, I suppose, that 2-point stuff, the scoring on multiple levels, that's going to be even more important than ever from him. Kyle Lowry has to give them something closer to what he's doing tonight, which is a good sign. Being quick with those catch and shoot 3-pointers and all those things. And then Jimmy Butler has to take control of the offense. And that was, to me, the biggest thing in the playoffs last year. It wasn't people go, oh, well, Tyler Herro's out and the Heat are better without Tyler Herro, and that whole narrative. I think if there was a positive to that, is that it just kind of cleaned up the pecking order for Miami. And it was basically, hey, there's no Tyler Herro here, so Jimmy, you just got to do it. And then he went on to have that historic run against the Milwaukee Bucks and had a great half a series against the Knicks until he turned his own ankle. But that's the kind of Jimmy Butler that we need to see right now for the Heat to stay where they are, which is 500. They've won 3 straight. They're back to 4-4 after basically a disastrous start to the season. To avoid kind of sinking into a deeper hole than they need to be, it's gonna be a lot on Jimmy.
I don't know how realistic that is. Like, it's not to say that he can't do it. And I'm sure he'll have his moments. Like, I mean, there's a possibility, even as I'm just thinking out loud right now, like Tyler could be out until the Christmas Day game. Like, that seems like an eternity away. And that's also a very realistic time frame. Again, I mean, I'm just supposing here, and I don't know exactly how much time he'll miss. We won't know until tomorrow. And those things can always fluctuate and change. But I don't know that Jimmy can consistently put up those kind of numbers over a 4-week, that's the bare minimum. Let's say if it's a 4-week stretch, especially when they're on the road, he'll do more. And again, that's why I think it's going to be on everybody. We're going to see more from Bam. We're going to see more from Jimmy, more from Kyle. Hopefully, Caleb returns for him.
It has to be on all of them. Caleb Martin. Yeah, I'm not saying Jimmy's got to go out there and score 36 points a night. I'm just saying he's got to just run the offense. It's got to be his show.
That's fair.
Now.
That's fair.
And that's it. Let's look ahead to this road trip. This was the first of a 10-game road trip, and I'm including the Brooklyn game in there because that's basically a road game. You come home, like you're on the road, you come home for a second, and then you go back on the road. You're home for 48 hours. Barely counts. Yeah. So you've got Saturday in Atlanta without Tyler Herro. That's a high-powered Hawks offense. They look really good lately. That's probably a loss. And then the next game in San Antonio, the second night of a back-to-back. And we know how the Heat struggle in San Antonio. Like, that could be a loss too.
So they go from Atlanta to San Antonio that night, and then they have to play the next day against Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs.
Yeah, and against a team with a lot of size that the Heat and size is typically what the
Yeah.
Heat struggle with. Tuesday in Charlotte, that's probably a win. The Hornets stink. Thursday versus the Nets at home, that could be a win or a loss. The Heat have had a hard time with Brooklyn. Saturday in Chicago, and then Monday in Chicago in that sort of baseball series. Let's say they split that. Wednesday in Cleveland. I don't know. That could be a win. It could be a loss. I actually think Miami matches up well with Cleveland. But still, the Cavs are a solid team. Friday in New York against the Knicks, they're a solid team. And Saturday again in Brooklyn on the second night of a back-to-back, probably a loss on the second night of a back-to-back. That's a scheduled loss. So I'm
that's
not making
4-6?
predictions here, but yeah, you can easily go 4-5 or 3-6 during those 9 games. And now you go from being 4-4 now to 8-9 or 7-10 or something like that. That would probably be a win without Tyler Herro. As crazy as it sounds. You know what I mean? Because it's you got 2 scheduled losses in a 9-game stretch. 8 of the 9 games are on the road. It could be worse. It could be worse. Like, this is a really tough stretch.
I thought it was 9 of 10 games on the road.
Well, that was including the Memphis one, which
okay, yeah. Fair enough. Sorry about that. Yes, yeah, I guess. I mean, well, if you go 3-6 over that stretch, 4-6 of these 10 games, I mean, it's not disastrous, but it's 3 games under 500. I guess you're probably right. It's probably a good place for the team to be in. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of underwhelming at the same time, though. Like, it could be worse, but it's also feels like this team should be able to do better because we've seen them kind of, one player we haven't mentioned, like, what's the role for Jaime Jaquez? Like, he's continuing to grow right before our eyes. And I know it could lead to another conversation about Josh Richardson not stepping up. Like, if there was a blight on today's game, it was Josh Richardson. And I hate to say it, but I think that's the reality. Now, conversely, you've got Jaquez playing a bigger role, coming up big with a huge 3-pointer in the clutch, making great defensive possessions, initiating transition baskets, making the right play, making the right pass, etc.
I think he
Can
continues
he take
to be
on a bigger role?
Yeah, I mean, he could take on more scoring, more playmaking. They've already asked him to do some of that. They've got that one little UCLA play that they run for him every once in a while. Yeah, he could definitely do more. And as soon as Caleb Martin's healthy, he takes Josh Richardson's spot in the rotation. End of story. Like, it's just Josh Richardson hasn't been good for Miami this year. And so once Caleb's healthy, he comes in. You don't have to move anybody out of the rotation. Jaime keeps his spot because Tyler Herro's hurt. And so that's probably what you're looking at in terms of your top 9 in the rotation. So we don't know when Caleb Martin is going to come back. Perhaps some clarity on that soon as well. And like we said, more clarity on Tyler Herro expected by Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. And we will have another episode for you breaking that down once we get the news. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast app.